Hello BookTube, this is part 27 of my 2022 library tour, and this is Science Fiction and Fantasy 4. Yesterday I finished the first bookcase of Science Fiction and Fantasy, and today we're moving on to the second. The second bookcase will comprise the next four parts of the Science Fiction and Fantasy part of the tour. So let's get started. So the first book is another book by Deborah Chester. This is The Queens Gambit, which I think is the first book in a different series. Or maybe not. So when I talked about the Pearl yesterday, I didn't really give a lot of context about how I picked up the books. The why. A few years ago, I bought Deborah Chester's fantasy fiction formula, where she talks about how to write fantasy stories, and there are a number of really good bits to the book, particularly the character creation sheet. But I was curious as to how Chester writes herself, like how her writing, her fiction measures up to her teaching. And so I decided, so when I went to Golden's book exchange at Used Bookstore in Waco for the last time, or the last time I went, I made a point to see if they had any Deborah Chester alongside a few other authors, and Golden's had, I think, two. Or they had a number, and I picked out two. And I read The Pearl, and I didn't particularly care for it, so I haven't gotten around to this one yet. But, again, going back to that trip to Golden's, this is the trip where I went to the... so every other month, Golden's has a half-off sale. And so in August of 2019, I wanted to go, but my brother and sister-in-law didn't want to take me, or couldn't, or something. So I decided to take the bus. So the bus picked me up, and there were a few passengers on there who were being taken home. So instead of going to Waco, the bus went to Moody and to the southern cities of McLennan County, before dropping people off, picking more people up, dropping them off, until eventually until the bus hooked around to I-35 and eventually got to Waco. And by the time I finally got to Golden's, about an hour and a half after I got on the bus to bring me home was waiting for me. So that was annoying. I was able to stay a bit. The bus driver went and picked up a few other people before coming to get me, and then brought me home. I think on another hour tour, though. It was, yeah. So that was the last time I went to Golden's. The next time I go, somebody will be driving me, either my brother or my sister-in-law. But anyway, so that's the story behind picking those books up. The next two books I've also picked up from Golden's, although maybe I think a year or so before. First up is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, the first book in the Mortal Instruments series. This is a major YA fantasy series. I also have the second volume, City of Ashes. This is about, the series is about a number of young superhumans who serve as monster hunters, and sort of the kind of underworld society that happens. I read bits of City of Bones, but I've never finished it. I kind of bailed on it. So, yeah. Although I have seen the first season or so of the TV adaptation, Mortal Instruments. No, Shadowhunters is the TV adaptation. But I've never actually read the books beyond dipping into the first few chapters of City of Bones. Anyway, next is another book I bailed on. This is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This came out about a year ago. It's about a young conscript soldier who returns to her homeland and gets involved with the young princess of a imperialistic power who wishes to present a friendlier side to the empire by peaceably ending a rebellion. I think that's generally what the story's about. I started the novel and I think I bailed within 2 chapters. I thought the world building was not very interesting. I had some problems with it. I didn't particularly like the characters. And I'm not entirely sure why the princess wasn't the queen when she really should have been the queen. So, anyway. Yeah. Next is a major work of fantasy. This is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. So this was a major work that came out about almost 20 years ago. Massive tome. It's a steampunk alternate history. I have had a go at this before and didn't particularly get on with it, and I decided to pick this up to have another go at it, even though I haven't actually had another go at it in a while. So anyway, I picked it up from the Friends of the Library fiction book sale. So the Friends of the Waco-McLennan County Library has 2 sales. They have a big sale of thousands of books in November, usually at a convention center. Usually it's at the Extraco. 1 year it was, or I think for 1 year it was at the Waco Convention Center. But so normally it's pretty much an entire space is devoted to books. In the late spring, the Friends at the Library book sale has a smaller book sale at the West Waco Library in one of the, conference rooms or presentation rooms where it's only fiction and primarily paperback fiction are on sale there. So that's what I picked. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I think I also picked this one up too from there. This is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is a pop culture suffused, near future cyberpunk novel in which the creator of a very popular video game gives pretty much in his will the winner of a competition gets the company. And so the main character is a young gamer called Wade, who's played by Ty Sheridan. This is the movie tie-in cover. So I've read, I think I read a few, I don't know how many chapters I read. Because I checked it out a few years ago and bailed on it. And wanted to come back to it, and so I eventually picked up this one, but haven't gotten to it yet. Next is Superheroes Meets Zombies. This is Ex-Heroes by Peter Clines. This is a novel in which a superhero world has become a zombie apocalypse. Haven't gotten around to it yet. So I really need to. Next are all from one series, or a series and a sequel series, by David B. Coe. This is Rules of Ascension, Book 1 of the Winds of the Forelands series, which I've had for a while. I'm not entirely sure where I picked it up from. I think maybe Golden's. And I remember starting it and ending up passing on it. But that didn't stop me from picking up Book 2, Seeds of Betrayal, or Book 3, Bonds of Vengeance. Now let's see if the hardback is the conclusion. Oh, yeah. This is Book 5, Weavers of War. And I think the next one should be the beginning of the sequel series. Yeah. This is the Sorcerer's Plague, Book 1 of Blood of the Southlands. Moving on. This is Rethu by Storm Constantine. It's a omnibus edition that includes the enchantments of flesh and spirit, the bewitchments of love and hate, and the fulfillments of fate and desire. Or though, let's check to make sure that's actually what they are. Yeah, okay. So, Rethu is a weird, near future, far future, post-apocalyptic fantasy science fiction series in which sort of a third gender arises within humanity called the Rethu. I've been interested in this series for a while, and rather interested in Storm Constantine's work for a while, although I really haven't made much of a effort to really read her. I think she's rather similar to Kenneth Lee in a lot of ways, but again, I need to really read this at some point. Another omnibus I have is The Chronicles of the Black Company by Glenn Cook. This includes The Black Company, Shadows Linger, and The White Rose. I've read The Black Company and I quite liked it. It's a story of a mercenary band who are hired by a dark overlord, the lady, who to serve in her army, and the Black Company basically does a number of jobs for the lady, up to and including allowing her to, or aiding her in defeating several threats to her role before ultimately turning on her. Next is an anthology I talked about last week. This is Griot, a Sword and Soul anthology edited by Milton J. Davis and Charles R. Saunders. Again, Griot is an anthology of Sword and Soul, which is a spin-off of Sword and Sorcery, inspired by African history and mythology and culture. And I bought this book a few years ago because I was really interested in Sword and Sorcery and all of the variations of Sword and Sorcery. But when I finally got around to reading it last week, I didn't have much success. And the last 4 books are all by one author, Elliot de Bodard, and 3 of which are from one series. The first book is The House of Shattered Wings by Elliot de Bodard. This is the first book in the Dominion of the Fallen series, in which fallen angels and other mythological beings have fallen to Paris in the early 20th century and have completely, radically changed the city. They've taken it over. And so Paris is now ruled by a number of houses founded by or descended from these fallen angels. This first book focuses on House Silverspire, I think it was, which was a house founded by Lucifer. And so it's a revenge story about a betrayal that happened long ago. There are three narrators. I think one is the leader of Silverspire, and then the alchemist of the house, and then a Vietnamese sorcerer. And I really enjoyed it. It's been too long since I've read it. It's been like 2017. This was one of my favorite books of 2017. So I quite enjoyed it. And I picked up, I think in 2017, and I think also read it in 2017, The House of Binding Thorns, which is the second book in the Dominion of the Fallen series. This book changes the focus from Silverspire to House Hawthorne, which in the first book was a bit more antagonistic. In this case, the alchemist who's since gone back to House Hawthorne, and the Vietnamese magician remain as narrators, joined by a young dragon prince who lives in the Seine. And this one is really good. I think I enjoyed this one a bit more than I did House of Shattered Wings. And I also, I think the following year or so, I picked up the third book in the series, The House of Sundering Flames by Elliot de Bedard. Now, you're probably wondering why this book is in a different format than the other two. Well, that's because this is the first book I ever bought from Book Depository. Because these two books have one weird and annoying publishing history. If you look at the spines, House of Shattered Wings is published by Rock, although probably was eventually picked up by Ace, who published the second book. This one is, I think, a Galan's edition, or Orion, yeah, Galan's. And this book, I don't think, has ever had an American publication. I think Elliot de Bedard's American publishers dropped the series after the second book. So I had to go to Book Depository to pick it up. So that's why it's in this edition rather than a hardcover. Now, this isn't the only time this will happen. Because there are two books I have that haven't gotten a hardcover, like sequels to hardcovers. Although I have no intention of actually picking up the sequels because I don't like either of the books. But there's another case, which we'll get to later, where I do like the series, and I've picked up the first two books in American edition, but the third and fourth books in the series are going to be from UK and picked up from Book Depository. Although I do need to order the fourth book soonish. So, but I haven't gotten around to The House of Sundering Flames yet. I really need to. And finally, for this shelf, I have another book by Elliot de Bedard. This is Fireheart Tiger. This is a slim novella from Tor.com. Yeah. Who publishes a number of slim novellas or short novels, really. So this one is, because it came out last year, and I had a go at it last year, and I don't remember much about it. I didn't particularly care for it, unfortunately, and I did bail. So that was shelf 4 of science fiction and fantasy. We've got quite a ways to go still, so I'll be back tomorrow with part 28 of the overall 2022 library tour, and more specifically, part 5 of science fiction and fantasy. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.